It's not every day that a fictional character transcends the story it's in and becomes part of pop culture. In the rare occasions when this happens, the characters are usually villains. Darth Vader, Heath Ledger's Joker, Thanos, characters that go simply beyond the scope of their own story. Characters that people remember for years to come, even after the works they were in have long ended. Madara Uchiha is one of those characters. A character that simply took the world by storm after his introduction in Naruto. But how does a character become an icon? Sit back, relax, and enjoy this journey where I'll be telling you how Madara Uchiha became an icon. Madara's legendary path to becoming an icon did not begin in chapter 559, the first chapter the character was properly introduced in the series. It began way before that. Madara Uchiha was built around the hype of the character in the universe itself. The first time we caught a glimpse of Madara was when Naruto and Sasuke fought in the Valley of the End, and we saw his statue there, facing Hashirama's statue. During part 1, we didn't actually know for sure what those were. Kakashi said something about it being ironic that Naruto and Sasuke would have fought right in that place, but nothing more than that. We didn't get a name drop, but it was a seed, a subtle hint in the world building of things to come and of a character of legendary proportions. Eventually, the Nine Tails itself compares Sasuke's Sharingan to Madara Uchiha's Sharingan. Sasuke doesn't really know who Madara was at the time, but that was someone the Nine Tails was talking about in a very ominous tone. The audience would know it's a very dangerous and possibly extremely powerful character. After all, we've all seen what the Nine Tails is capable of, and if the Nine Tails thinks that this character is worthy of praise, then it's a very clear message for the audience that this Madara Uchiha fella is simply on another level. After that, we keep on getting more and more references to Madara. Jiraiya himself states that Madara was a legendary shinobi, and then of course we get the Toby reveal when he claims to be Madara Uchiha. And one of the coolest reveals in Naruto, that bumbly character turns out to be the legendary Uchiha, the one behind everything. Of course, that's not actually Madara Uchiha, but we're gonna come back to that later. Madara's presence is therefore established in the world of Naruto, even though it wasn't Madara himself who did it. It was a proxy. The name itself evokes the power of the legend, and therefore the shinobi world fears Madara Uchiha just by dropping his name. They had no clue if that was the real Madara. Sure, the masked guy was powerful enough, but he could just be someone posing as him, which is actually true. The name itself was enough to force the entire world to set aside their differences and join forces to make an alliance and combat Madara Uchiha, because the power he displayed in the past was so great, they just couldn't take any chances. His legendary fight with the first Hokage that created the Valley of the End was something that's also ingrained in the lore of the universe, and characters referred to it even before he showed up. But of course, Madara eventually shows up through the Edo Tensei. When we see that character for the first time, he's being built up so much that we just know he is going to be powerful. Now that's, of course, our first assumption going into that chapter or that episode. Obviously, Madara Uchiha is going to be extremely strong. But to be honest, we didn't know much more about him. He could just be a pushover, you know, a character that's strong, but that's kind of boring and pointless. The hype around the character is extremely important to create an icon, but it's not enough. Just hyping the character up but not delivering would be actually much worse. Nevertheless, Madara Uchiha appears in his long-haired glory. And naturally, after he appears, the chapter ends, and we have to wait a week for his actual fight. The same thing happens in the anime. And this is where there's a difference. The introductory scene was very different, actually. Madara's fight against the Alliance was much longer in the anime. Not that it wasn't impactful in the manga, it was very impactful, but I think that this is one of the few instances where the anime actually did a better job than the manga. I remember when I watched Madara Uchiha fighting the Shinobi Alliance, boss with taijutsu alone, thousands of shinobis at the same time, and the animation is just gorgeous. It's one of the best animated episodes in the entire show, which really helps the character. And all that part, up until he uses the massive fire style, was not in the manga. The anime crew did an impressive job, improving on the source material and having that taijutsu fight where Madara is just casually destroying the Alliance shows how much above them he is. But that's not what actually cements Madara Uchiha as a powerhouse of the verse. No, what he does later in that episode is what actually makes him a character that will be remembered. He drops a literal meteor on the Alliance, and Naruto, the main character, has to run away. This isn't something Naruto usually does. Naruto doesn't run away, and this time he has nothing else he can do other than getting out of there. Two Kages, the Tsuchikage and the Kazekage, have to join forces in order to stop that meteor from crashing on the Alliance, and they are able to do so after this amazing effort. The contrast between the two Kages and Madara's demeanor is night and day. Madara summoned a meteor extremely casually, while Gaara and Onoki almost died of exhaustion in order to stop the meteor. Madara's coolness while dropping the meteor is also something that's gonna be remembered. And then, of course, after he casually drops a meteor, Madara simply says, "Well then, what are you going to do about the second one, Onoki?" And the second meteor crashes down the first one, impacting the Alliance and killing thousands in an instant. But the most impressive thing, and what I think people really remember about that, is how casual Madara was when he did that. The only thing comparable to that a character has done before was Pain's Shinra Tensei and Chibaku Tensei. And in both of those instances, Pain/Nagato almost died in order to perform those jutsus because they were so taxing to their body and chakra. Madara, on the other hand, could have been having breakfast while he dropped the two meteors. And this was a very clear message. This guy is not on the same level as anyone you've seen before. The main characters are screwed. And by that introduction alone, even though Madara seems to be completely unstoppable, he becomes a very compelling character. The one-liners and the sheer coolness of his powers were enough to make audiences love him. There's a reason why this is the episode that most people react to on YouTube. It's simply because everyone likes to see someone else's face whenever the two meteors appear in the sky and destroy the Alliance. It's satisfactory, it's cool. Not to mention that Madara's character design is amazing. His hair, long and spiked, kind of reminds you of older shonen characters, especially Dragon Ball characters even. But it also has this very distinct Naruto feeling to it. You don't think it's a weird choice, even though it's something very different. But being different actually makes it stand out, so it's not a bad thing at all. His armor is something from another time. You can clearly see he is an older shinobi, and it looks really awesome too. His face, the Uchiha features, the eyes, the Rinnegan, and the Sharingan also look amazing. So props for Kishimoto for designing such a cool character. But there is something else that makes Madara stand out. His voice. Naoya Uchida has possibly the coolest, most intimidating voice that anyone has ever had. And the voice acting he delivers for Madara Uchiha is absolutely top notch. Madara's voice is absolutely perfect for the character. This is one of those instances where you just have to get lucky and get the right person at the right time. Of course that Uchida was already the voice actor for Toby whenever he became Madara, but they could have easily changed Madara's voice to someone else's. And if you watch it dubbed, I'm sorry, but you're doing it wrong. Madara's voice combined with his one-liner one-liners create the coolest character ever. He is arrogant but playful at the same time, and he can also back up his arrogance with his power, which is not something everyone can do. There are just so many good one-liners. It's like Kishimoto decided to throw the best Naruto lines into this one character. And every time he has those one-liners, he's doing something extremely cool. But coming back to his fight against the Alliance, after he dropped the 2 meteors, some of the shinobi survive, and then he decides to just, casually whip out the most powerful wood style we've ever seen up until that point in the story. Much more powerful than Hashirama's Edo Tensei that fought against Hiruzen, and we're like, okay, this guy is invincible. Then Naruto, of course, counters that, but still, it's a showing of power. After that, Madara fights against the 5 Kage, and people don't really realize how important this fight is for the universe as a whole. This is the first time the 5 Kage are fighting together. It's something that's unprecedented, something no one in this universe ever thought possible, something that only Madara Uchiha and his formidable power was able to accomplish by simply making every single nation in the world having to align themselves against him, and having the leaders of the nations coming together and fight him at the same time is very emblematic, and it's so well themed. The Madara versus 5 Kage fight is just one of the best fights in the entire manga/anime. Tsunade being a Senju and Onoki having a history with Madara makes it even deeper, and the thing about this fight is that every time we think the Kage have an advantage over Madara, we just find out a couple of pages later that no, they actually didn't have an advantage whatsoever. Madara was just toying with them, and this is frustrating because the Kage are not doing any progress, but yet it's so cool to see Madara showing off his powers and just saying, you're nothing compared to me. I'm just having fun with you, testing my new jutsus and all that. And then he whips out the perfect Susanoo at the end of the fight, after he acknowledges that the 5 Kage are powerful. After the perfect Susanoo is out, Onoki simply asks, why didn't you come after us with full strength? And Madara replies that, why would an adult use full strength against kids? They're simply not at Madara's level. And we can see that he craves fighting strong opponents. He actually wants to fight. He wants to fight Hashirama again. He relishes when he is fighting 8 Gates guy. He has the time of his life in that fight, even though he's getting pummeled. One of the not so great things about Madara's writing is how he's able to release the Edo Tensei by performing the jutsu's hand signs. That was a little bit weird. Not something I particularly liked about the story. There were ways to write it better, but by no means that ruined the character, and to be honest, everyone wanted to see more of Madara. Kishimoto's original plan was to have Madara go away after Itachi releases the Edo Tensei, but Madara had become a beast. He was too popular to go away, and he was actually carrying the Naruto manga at that point in the story. People were buying the manga just because Madara was present, and he revitalized the popularity of the show. So even though he wasn't in Kishimoto's final plans, he became a necessity, and rightly so. I wish he had been the final villain, but we're gonna get to that. Madara joins Obito then, and we get the backstory about how Madara essentially brainwashed Obito into doing everything he wanted him to do, orchestrating this entire war, and also the Akatsuki capturing the tail beast so that the Jubi could be formed. Obviously, Madara isn't pleased that Obito hastened their plans and began to summon the 10 tails before they captured the 8 and the 9 tails, but Madara had countermeasures for that as well. It's at that point of the story that we get the iconic "Wake Up to Reality" speech, which has become a little bit cringe, you could say, of how much they use it in stupid memes on TikTok. It's really annoying, but the original speech is actually very interesting, and obviously the Japanese version is much better than the dub. We get Madara's core motivations through that speech, and if you think about it, that's a kind of speech that can actually seduce you, and it makes you think, man, this Madara guy, he actually has a point, which isn't something needed for a villain to work, but it can make a villain deeper. He's tired of a world with losers. He's tired of a world with suffering. He wants everyone to be happy and live the best life they can. plan, even if it has to be in a dream. But as they're not gonna know they're in a dream, it doesn't matter, right? So there isn't really any problems, correct? It's fine. If you're gonna be living the best life you could ever possibly imagine, you're gonna think it's real, and that's what actually matters. It's a very compelling argument. Of course, some people are gonna say, no, I would never go for it. But you can see why people such as Obito would be so tempted into completing the Eye of the Moon plan. And this is another facet that makes Madara an iconic villain. He has a compelling plan and compelling motivations that are intertwined with the character themes and backstory very well. Speaking of which, after that we get Madara's backstory told through Hashirama's perspective, which is a brilliant choice by Kishimoto. By having someone else telling Madara's backstory and the story of how the Uchiha and the Senju clan fought and eventually founded the Leaf Village makes things more grounded in the universe. Hashirama is actually a reliable narrator. We can see that he isn't biased towards Madara's side or his own side. He's actually telling the story because he wants to make sure Sasuke does not follow Madara's path. So he does not sugarcoat anything, and he does not want to make Madara look worse or better. He just wants to tell Sasuke the truth, but he also gives his own perspective. Madara's story with Hashirama, how they were friends, how they had dreams together, is beautiful. Everything they went through, fighting every other week during the Warring States period up until they found the village and achieved their dreams, is something inspiring. But then Madara goes rogue. Hashirama just doesn't know why. Unbeknownst to him, Madara had discovered the possibility of the Eye of the Moon plan, a plan that would essentially erase the need for villages and the shinobi system in general, so there was no point for Madara to stay in the Leaf anymore. Everyone abandoned him, even his clan, but he still had to fight Hashirama in order to awaken the Rinnegan, and that's exactly what he did. He faked his death, got a hold of Hashirama's flesh, and implanted it in himself. Things didn't go according to plan, and he only awakened the Rinnegan very late in his life, prior to his death. And that's the reason why he had to use Obito as a proxy for the entire show. And of course, the Madara versus Hashirama fight is epic. I know a lot of people complain that, oh, the powers got too out of hand, you know, they're just using gigantic things, and oh, the Madara Susanoo and Hashirama's 1,000 hands Buddha statue, they're just clumsy and dumb. But this argument just doesn't really hold. You have to remember that in the first arc of the story, Kakashi and Zabuza were throwing massive water dragons against each other that weren't silent or stealthy at all. Naruto was never a story about stealth. It makes sense for Madara and Hashirama to have that power level to be destroying mountains, because in the very first page of the manga, it was stated that the Nine Tails was capable of leveling mountains by waving its tail. So we're just seeing that in action here. And the way Kishimoto drew that fight is amazing. The way he paneled it, how the fight flows, how the scale shows the power of the characters is just amazing. It's one of my favorite fights in the entire manga, and that volume of the manga, volume 63, is my favorite by far. The story of Hashirama and Madara is so good. It's one of the reasons why Madara became this iconic character. Of course, then Madara returns to life for real this time, not through Naruto Tensei, but his actual body, which creates even more problems for the Shinobi Alliance. He is able to solo all 9 tail beasts, including Naruto himself, and beat 2 perfect Jinchurikis that were established to be extremely powerful, and Madara no-diffs them, or should I say negative diffs them. He then becomes the Jinchuriki of the 10 tails, and more mayhem ensues. Madara has one of the best fights in the manga against Might Guy when he uses the 8th gate. It's just a shame that Might Guy didn't die at the end, because it would have been far more impactful. And whenever Madara achieves the power of the Sage of Six Paths and gets the second Rinnegan, the scale of his power is absolutely frightening. He casually whips out dozens of Chibaku Tensei planetoids, and you can look at this panel right here. We can see the curvature of the Earth, so you can get a rough scale scale of how massive the Chibaku Tenseis are, compare them to the base of the Divine Tree as well to see how large they are. And you have to remember that this tree is absolutely massive. For comparison, just look at how small Sasuke's Chibaku Tensei looks if compared to the tree, and then look at Madara's. This is the pinnacle of shinobi power, and there's nothing that can stop Madara Uchiha, except that there is. What really holds the character back from literally being the most iconic character in all of manga/anime history is how the character ended. Madara's demise was the worst thing in fiction as far as I'm concerned. It's by far the most disappointing thing I've had the misfortune to read, and one of the worst plot twists to ever grace our shonen world. Having Zetsu being the mastermind behind shinobi history, Kaguya, everything about it is absolutely terrible. But that's a matter for another video. What matters here is that Madara's true potential was not achieved, unfortunately.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
The end of a character is as important as the beginning and the middle of it. Madara's ending was terrible. It was supposed to be a final climactic fight against our main characters, which would have been pretty cool to watch. And depending on how Kishimoto handled that fight, it could have been the best fight in the series. But instead, we got a fight against an alien that had no personality and had no build-up and was just absolutely terrible. Madara's final moments are okay, you could say. He kind of regretted what he did. Not really, but he kind of did. It was kind of a gray area there of Madara toasting his time as a war brother with Hashirama. Not the worst final moment for a character, but not the best by any means. But of course, the moment was completely undermined by having Madara being stabbed in the back by Black Zetsu out of nowhere. It's just so unfortunate that this amazing character with such a great build-up, great character design, amazing voice, great one-liners, amazing writing, an absolute god-tier backstory, a likable personality, and every other possible iconic trait for a character that simply had everything to become a staple of pop culture, was cut short by the necessity of introducing a race of aliens for the worthless sequel. Oh man, what could have been? Even so, Madara is still an iconic character. Everyone in the anime community knows who Madara is, and he is a very prominent villain, even up until this day. So much so that every Naruto fan is just glad that he isn't in Boruto, because he would have been destroyed, just like everything else in that show. Madara reminds me of that painting in the Sistine Chapel. The painting of God trying to reach out to humanity. So close, but yet so far. If not by a Black Zetsu, that glory may have been achieved. We can only imagine how that would have been. Or maybe not. Maybe someone could try to rewrite the story so that final glorious fight could happen. Who knows? Maybe someone's gonna do that one day.